All right, who is Israel? The picture I got is that of putting a tuna fish sandwich through a keyhole. That is to say, there is so much in Scripture on this. Wow, I've already got them crying and coming to their knees. The idea in this is that there's a lot to this subject matter, but it's really important to us because ultimately, it helps you to understand your status, your position in the kingdom. It helps you to understand something about who you are in Messiah and in relationship to other believers, and it helps you to be able to dialogue. This is something that we're all growing on. The idea was to bring that bullet point of the statement of faith of City on a Hill, so to use that as a starting point. But go back to that and use that as a starting point. And then as we go through this today, my point is not to hit you over the head with my theology, but to look at passages which are obvious passages about who Israel is, and then be good Bereans and come to conclusions, okay? Because that helps us in relationship to dialogue with other people. My mother was Catholic. I have people at work that are atheist, that have their own thing going. So these passages help us to gather a little bit better where our ground is, where our definition. Because if we say, well, I don't live by the law, I live by the Spirit, then I have to wonder which Spirit you're following. Because at some point, even if you're only a New Testament person, Yeshua said, if you love me, you'll keep my commands. Okay? So either I make up my own rules and I play with my own ball on my own field, or I have to work with the equipment and the guidelines that have been given to me. And the last time I checked, this is not my ball field. This is his, and I'm living in it. People will read, and if you have thoughts on passages we're looking at, great, because that's the idea, is to iron sharpen iron and look at what Scripture says, what defines Israel, not we ourselves. Here's my disclaimer, and that is that what I'm not going to talk about directly today is a thing called dual theology or two-house theology. The subject matter is going to overlap. It's going to touch into those things, but I'm not focusing on what is right as far as this or that. We're just focusing on what Scripture says is Israel, okay? Oh, David, I love it. You make me feel like I'm in a coliseum full of people. Can you hear me, David? Okay, good. Oh, good, I see his hand. Yes, brother, I see that hand. Okay, here we go. All right, I have written down on the screen, they're hiding at the moment, a couple of ideas, what are common thoughts of what Israel is. But rather than, Josiah, now is the time, if you are ready with that microphone, I'm going to have you solicit our studio audience for some idea of what is typically understood as Israel. If you walk up to someone on the street and you say, what is true Israel? They're going to say, and it might be this, and it might be that. So think on that for a moment while I waffle. But there are, I figure, 3 or maybe 4 major ideas of what fits this. So the answer there is a good Jew, in essence. If you were born Jewish, but you have switched faith to Messiah, Yeshua, then that does not count. It is something that when we were in Texas, we were with a fellow that he had a contact with the Lubavitcher Jews in New York City. And he asked one time, one of the rabbis, he said, if I believe this guy from history was Messiah, am I still a good Jew in good standing? Yes, you are. How about this one? Yes. How about this one? Yes. How about Yeshua? No. Well, why not? And the answer was, this particular rabbi, because Yeshua has done more to upset the Jewish system than in all of history than anybody else. Now, that's a real paraphrase, but the whole idea is he had a massive impact. And we can say, yes, that's the idea. Scripturally, spiritually, eternally. Do we have a microphone or not? No. It's not working? Okay. Then we will work with what we have. Okay, so there are two. Any other definitions? Yes. God's chosen people. That's a blanket statement. Careful, but it's a good one. Isaac's son. Well, there you go. Wow, that is Israel. I didn't even put that one down on my list, if you can believe it. Here are the four that I put. Israel, in the concept, was never fully lost, because when Nehemiah and Ezra come back, they give a list of a list of families that are coming back, and there are several, including Levi. And so it could be comprehended that with that and the modern nation of Israel, the 12 tribes have reassembled, because that is historical and it is a spiritual timing of our Heavenly Father. That's an argument. The church has taken the place of spiritual Israel. That is another argument that is taken when you look at certain passages in the New Testament. That thing's been nailed to the cross, and Paul says, I now turn. So that is a way of thinking. Another is both Jews and Christians comprehend Israel, but there's an eternal difference as far as what their functions and their capacities are. And then the last one that I thought of was that, for eternity, there's no difference. Jew, Gentile, male, female, slave, free, we're all saved by the same blood. Okay, so without even going into that, let us go to the origins. All right, this is where you'll need your scriptures, or you'll have to look up on my screen. Do we first hear of Israel with a fellow by the name of Abraham? No, of course not. And yet, we cannot get away from Abraham, because Genesis 15, that's where he cuts the covenant with them, and then a couple of chapters later reinforces it. He says, you're going to have children, you're going to have the land, you're going to have the blessing. Okay? How about Isaac? No, still not yet. But still just as important, because this is the Akedah, or this is the prayer or the scriptural passage that is said more often in Judaism than any other passage, because it is recited in daily prayers, and it's said on its day of scriptural reading, and then it's said again on, is it Yom Kippur, or is it, there's a holy day. Sorry, I fell short. But it's more than 365 times per year that it's reaffirmed. So the binding of Isaac and the meaning of Isaac's carrying on or having that covenant is significant. Where we first see it is in Jacob, right? Okay, so just real quick, the background on Jacob, chapter 27. Isaac says to Esau, go out, Josiah, and get some of that choice meat. Josiah Olson. We were talking about this word choice. Choice? Well, what choice? Take a burger. No, it's the idea that you go out and you hunt and you bring back that really delicious meat that Father Isaac likes, and you prepare it, and he's then going to bless you. Mother hears, she grabs Jacob and says, hey, get in there. I'll microwave this real quick, put on the hairy outfit, and talk with a deep voice, and you get the blessing. And then chapters 28 through 31, Jacob is on the run because he doesn't want to be killed by his brother, so he ends up with his favorite uncle, father-in-law. It's complicated. He gets a couple of wives. He gets some wives out of it, lots of children, lots of sheep, but his wages are messed with at least 10 times, right? Okay. And so on his way back home, he's a little worried about meeting Isaac or Esau, right? Because Esau is coming with a credit card He's coming with 400 men. Yeah, that's not generally a good message on the border by Kiev. Okay, so here we go. During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Yabok. He took them and sent them across the stream along with all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and there a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower Jacob, he struck the socket of Jacob's hip and dislocated it as they wrestled. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go until you bless me." That is an unusual thing. And if I haven't said it before, if you haven't heard it before, I will be surprised. But the lives of the patriarchs are prophetic for the nation of Israel and for human history. Things that happened to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob happened again. For instance, Abraham went to Egypt, and he came back with great riches. Isaac didn't go, but he almost went. He was told not to leave. Jacob went, and he came back with great riches. Okay? Egypt, the word Mitzrayim means, it's a dual word. It means bondage. So that's a double bondage. The children of Israel come out of double bondage. What have we come out of? We had a day assigned for our death because of our sins. We fell short, and yet we were delivered, weren't we? Okay, so we have this picture, and this is going on. Here's the rest. "What is your name?" the man asked. "Jacob." "Yaakov," he replied. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Yaakov, but Israel, because you have struggled with Elohim and with men, and you have prevailed." That is an interesting way of wording it. And Jacob requested, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed Jacob there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, saying, "Indeed, I have seen Elohim face to face, and yet my life was spared." Let's look at that word Israel right there just real quick. You probably can't see this well. This is just a little shot from Blue Letter Bible, but what I've highlighted here or underlined is that the word Israel comes from 2 words, Strong's reference, H8280 and H410. 410 is El, which is God, and 8280 is the word Sarah. I have that. Oh, yes. But put together then, this next underline, it means basically El persists, perseveres, or contends. Now that doesn't automatically mean beats to a pulp whoever he is, with whom he is contending. But the idea is that there's formidable strength. You're not this is an impasse. You are not going to overcome here. And that's what the man, the Adam Kadmon, the express image of the Heavenly Father, who came to wrestle with Jacob, the pre-incarnate Messiah, you might say, gave him that name. You have prevailed, both with man, with Laban, and yourself, and with Elohim. And you have come out of it. Okay, here's that word, that other word, Sarah. Where have we heard that word Sarah before? Yes, exactly. Was she not a princess? Sar. How about the term Sar Shalom? Have we heard that term? Yes, Prince of Peace. Okay, so you see the basic root of that word, and here it means to contend, have power, persist, exert oneself as a royal administrator would have, a prince would have. Okay? Just moving forward here. Okay, so moving forward, this is the moment that Jacob's name is changed, and it goes back and forth. I'm going now chronologically through Scripture, chronologically in general book order as well. Yes. Oh, that's right. I had forgotten that. Oh, I fell short. That is very good. That it is reinforced, it's reiterated to Jacob, your name is Israel. Oh, by the way, it is Israel. Hint, hint. Okay, so later on, we have now moved to Egypt. The family is there in Goshen. Jacob is on his deathbed, and he is he's called his sons in to bless them. And he has a very unusual blessing for two of his sons. Something happened at Shechem, which did not leave a good light on the family name. You might say Levi and Simeon wiped out the village because of the incident with Dinah. That's right, Dinah. Right. I was thinking Tamar. That was another story. But here's what it says. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are implements. Now, as I read this, just picture the scene. Jacob is on his bed, and he doesn't know when he's going to die, and he's got his hands on these two boys, and he says this blessing, keeping in mind that these boys are men. These men are quite familiar with the covenant that was made with their great-grandfather Abraham, reiterated to their grandfather Isaac, and they've been told this by their dad probably all the time, about the covenant, about the land, the blessing of children as numerous as the sand on the seashore, and that those who bless you will be blessed. Okay? So he says this, may my soul not enter into their counsel, may my glory not be united with their assembly, for in their anger they killed men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, their wrath, for it is cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them among Israel. Wait a minute. Okay, so what do you think they're thinking there? They're in Goshen, they're in Egypt. Don't know exactly how long we're going to be here. Maybe it was passed on to them that great-grandpa Abe had the message, 400 years, your children will be in slavery, and then they'll come out with great riches. What do you think they are thinking when it says, I will scatter them in Jacob? Dad, you're Jacob. I will disperse them among Israel. That's you. Especially on their deathbed. They say funny things. Any thoughts? Yes. Yes. Yeah, at the very least, even if we don't have an understanding of placement in the land, whenever that does happen, the family is going to keep living, and they're going to be cousins by the dozens, and they will intermarry, and that's a strong warning to those two boys. But isn't it interesting that ultimately Levi doesn't have a place of his own? He is dispersed intentionally, and then Simeon is engulfed within Judah. So it does make you wonder what they might have been thinking in that process. Okay, so going from Jacob/Israel passing away, then comes a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, and along comes a fellow by the name of Moses. Moses is standing in front of a burning bush, and the burning bush says, even when Yahweh talks, even E.F. Hutton listens. No, it says, then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says Yahweh, Israel, my son, my firstborn. Wait a minute. We suddenly have a new definition to Israel. What is it? Oh, it's the firstborn. Yeah, but who is the firstborn? That would have been Esau. The context here is Yahweh's talking through the burning bush to Moses, and he says, I want you to do this job. Go tell Pharaoh that Israel is my firstborn, my son. What? My collective body of children is my... Isn't that interesting? He calls them the firstborn. But now it has gone from a single man to the entire nation. This is the point where it happens. And just to jump back real quick, this is the word that's given to Abraham. Know for certain that your seed, singular, this is made reference, keep that in mind for later, of course, shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, plural, shall serve them, and they shall afflict them, plural, and also that nation. And afterward they shall come out with many possessions. Moving on, now the children of Israel have left Egypt, and they're sitting at the foot of Mount Sinai, and Moses is going up and down the mountain, quite the cardiovascular, and he gets this word from Yahweh. This is what you're to say to the house of Jacob and to the sons of Israel. Oh, it's still the same thing now, isn't it? In this moment, Yahweh is defining, he's still in part kind of saying, I'm calling you this, but you've come from Jacob, your dad, and so I'm carrying that name forward. Then you shall be my own possession among all people, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be for me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. And do you know what? In the end, I don't think I used that 2 Peter 2 passage. Crazy. Which connects with this, of course. Psalm 135, for Yahweh has chosen Jacob for himself, Israel as his own possession. There's just a reinforcement from the psalmist to come. Okay? So, and then here's another. Jeremiah's talking, and he says, they will come with weeping, and by pleading I will bring them. I will lead them by streams of water and on a straight path on which they will not stumble, for I am a father to Israel. Ephraim is my firstborn. Ephraim? Oh, okay, this is jumping ahead to Jeremiah, where we now have a divided kingdom, but we're not there yet. We're getting ahead of ourselves. It's the idea. Okay, so this idea from leaving Egypt all the way into the land, the conquest with Joshua, and the establishment of a monarchy with Saul and then David, we have the usage here. Now in all Israel was no one as handsome as Absalom. So that's just grabbing a nugget out, right? Here is under Solomon. 1 Kings 4, now King Solomon was king over all Israel. So this term is quite now well established. It is the nation, right? Next thing is, I should say, when Solomon dies, the kingdom goes to his son Rehoboam, and they say to Rehoboam, hey, your dad taxed us out the wazoo. What are you going to do? And Rehoboam says, I'm going to shut down the pipeline, and we're going to make us energy dependent again, and we are going to tax the wazoo and the wazoo until you didn't know you had that much wazoo. And so they say, we're out of here. And it says, so Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this point. Now, at the time of that writing, it could have been up to that point, but this could be prophetic too, to say there is still something of a conflict going on between the house of Israel and the house of David, or Judah. Okay, this is where we're going to jump ahead to where the northern kingdom has just been taken away, okay, to Assyria. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and carried Israel away into exile to Assyria and settled them. Okay, here's that double. We see this a lot in Hebrew poetry. You'll see one line that makes a statement, and the next line repeats the idea with different words. And so we have here, he captured Samaria and carried Israel away. What does that mean? They are the same, but Samaria, then I guess they're making it. Right. They are synonymous, but I guess in this sense then, he's not carrying away the land that's now been called Samaria. He's taking away the people. What's that? Yes, the Israelites, the people of the kingdom of Samaria, or the northern kingdom. Right. Okie doke. And here's the next part. This is, okay, so you have a difference between 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. What's the difference? Anybody know off the top of their head? Well, Kings was written first. Chronicles was basically, it covers the same thing, the timeline of the kings all the way up to the exile. However, the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles is trying to leave out some of the negative parts for the sake of giving hope for the people to come back, because it is ultimately understood that Yahweh will restore his people. So actually, this last line from the book of 2nd Chronicles, chapter 36, is already in exile, and well into exile, because here it is, Cyrus, the king, is making this pronouncement. And he's saying, Yahweh stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he sent a proclamation, also putting in writing, this is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. Yahweh, the El of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build him a house in Jerusalem. Wow, which is in Judah. There's a key point there, isn't it? he didn't refer to it as Israel because his, not him, but his grandfather, this would be the Medo-Persian kingdom. It was the Babylonian kingdom just a couple of kings before. Nebuchadnezzar went ahead and took them, and the land was called Judah because it was the kingdom of Judah. It was the southern kingdom, predominantly of the tribe of Judah. So that's what it's called. Whoever there is among you of all his people, may Yahweh his Elohim be with him. Go up then. Okay, so I'm just going chronologically through. We've started with a man, we've gone to a nation, and for the most part, it's pretty much carried until we split the kingdoms. The northern kingdom went Israel. The southern kingdom went, they're called Judah, quite a bit. But here's Ezra and Nehemiah when the people are coming back. This is interesting. They're called the sons of Israel. And as the books go on, they're called all Israel. Nehemiah called all Israel. All Israel? Well, all the people that came back with them. And they're called Israel. They're not called Jews. And they make reference to the God of Israel. So this name is brought back in here. Kind of interesting. Okay, so then when you look at the rest of the prophets of the Tanak, you have the big writers, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. You have the non-writers, Elijah and Elisha, to name two. But then you have, I split them into three categories, you might say. Early, that is to say, before the exiles, in the middle of the exile, in that 70 years of the southern kingdom, and then afterwards coming back. And who do they address? Well, the prophets that were before, they're given the message by Yahweh, go to this king or go to that king, or tell them both, you guys are into idolatry and you're into sin. You know, whatever sin it is, whether it's cheating your neighbor or what. And then eventually you get a fellow by the name of Jeremiah, and he's saying, it's coming, you need to repent. It's coming. Okay, never mind, it will come. And so I'm going to buy a piece of property because my family's coming back here someday, but we are gone. And that was not a popular message. The middle group are those in exile or during exile, and there are two messages. One is, get comfy. Ezekiel says, we're going to be here a while. We're going to stay here. We're going to grow gardens and going to build our family, and then we're going to go back because ultimately that's. But in the meantime, the shame on you people for disobeying, and you people. Yes, they never kept the Sabbath year, the Jubilee you're referring to. Oh, the Shemitah. Oh, 7 times 7. Oh, I never thought of that. The comment was that the question was posed of Yeshua, how many times do I need to forgive my brother? And it's the same number in the end as the number of years that the land had to have its Sabbaths while Israel was in exile. And then the last group are those that when the children of Israel came back, or the remnant came back and they were in the land, they were building the land, there was two messages. One, shame on you nations for rejoicing when Israel was down. And the other is to the people in the land. Get busy. Stop, fussing with your own little garden. Build the temple, build the foundation, build the temple, build the wall. Because we need to get ready. Okay? So that's our background. Now we are going to jump to the Gospels. And I'm going to take this real quick. This is where the laser comes in. Oh, shame on our laser, right? So be it. You can't read this either. That's my whole purpose today, is to bring you things that you cannot read. But if you can read this, more power to you. I have to stand this close. But I'll just give you a quick rundown. This is all Matthew here. Matthew, there's a little bit of Luke, and I think at the bottom, Mark. Oh, there's a couple of Mark. And this is interesting. I was thinking, before I went in to look at it, I'm probably just going to call it Judah. Everything's Judah. Well, it is interesting. They do talk about it as Judah as far as Yeshua and his disciples in their movement. They went and they're in Samaria, and they're in Galilee, and they're in Judah. But when they're talking, it's amazing how much they say Israel. Here's Matthew. Matthew, the first one, is quoting, of course, talking about Bethlehem, you, O Bethlehem, who will shepherd my people Israel. And then the angel talks to Joseph, and he says, get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. They're in Egypt. Go to the land of Israel. If you haven't noticed, angel, we are occupied right now. We don't even get to call it Israel, but that's what he calls it. And then Matthew, the writer, does the same thing. He says, Joseph got up and took his son and his wife back to Israel. The crowd, Yeshua is talking, and he says, truly, I have not seen such great faith with anyone in Israel. I would have thought that by bringing this up, that might be a little sore spot with the Roman centurion occupation presence, by talking about Israel, because that's a name that kind of speaks of rebellion, and there were not too few rebels in the land trying to overthrow the Roman government at the time. The crowds were amazed too, and they said, after he cast out the demon, nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel. But rather, Yeshua, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And that's the Great Commission again. But he answered, and I sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Again, Matthew is talking. Yeshua uses it. There's another Old Testament quote or Tanak quote. The crowd uses it. Yeshua, the crowd, a quote. These are quotes. Luke uses it. I mean, it's like every day. I would not have thought of that. I would not think that during the time of the occupation, they had much time to think about that. But, because they're more squabbling with, they're half the Roman Empire is enslavement of one form or another. And you have your political things going on between Herod, the Idumeans, and the Sadducees, and the Romans, and the Pharisees. And I'm just trying to survive, that sort of thing. Jumping ahead, we're moving farther here now. This is where I wanted to get to, one of the two places. Here's your quick overview of the book of Romans, okay? I just want to do, me, I like overviews so that we get something of context, okay? In your first chapter, Paul is greeting people. And again, this is overgeneralization. So don't take this as, wow, that's all there is in that. Chapters 1 and 2, condemnation of willful ignorance and sinfulness. 3 to 5, description of righteousness. Chapters 6 through 8, principles of sanctification. Chapter 9 through 11, and that's where we're going. He's now going to address his fellow Jews. He doesn't necessarily say those of the land, he just simply says my brothers. So that would comprehend those in the diaspora as well, you would think. Chapter 12 to 14, practical righteousness, and then at the end, his greetings and his plans, okay? So we're going to go to chapter 9 through 11 right now. If you want to jump there in your own scripture, you certainly may. This is where I'm looking for a little more comment. And it really is worth the full read of all three of these chapters. We're going to basically skip 10, but we're going to mostly focus on 11. Here's chapter 9, verses 3 to 5. For I could wish that I myself were accursed, separated from Messiah for the sake of my countrymen. There he calls them my countrymen, my kinsmen, according to the flesh, who are Israelites. He called them Israelites. He didn't call them Jews, what I would have figured. To whom belongs, now here's the big package, your benefits package. All right, brother, your benefits package as a son of Israel includes all expense paid for the glory, the covenants, the giving of the law, the temple service, and the promises, whose are the fathers, and for whom and from whom is Messiah according to the flesh. What advantage hath the Jew? Much in every way. I'd say that right there. But I want you to, I underlined the word adoption, just real quick. Tuck that in the back of your mind for a minute. You know where I'm going with that, don't you? Of course. When we get to Ephesians 2. Did I say that out loud? Who are Israelites belongs the adoption, the glory, the covenants, the giving of the law. Yeah. I laugh because you think, well, those Jews, they're just stuck on that law. Yeah, maybe because the Father gave it to do so. A little bit better keepers. Okay, next set of verses. But it is not as though the word of Yah has failed, for they are not all Israel who are descended from Israel, nor are they all children because they are Abraham's descendants. Okay, so that's, in some ways, those are the same thing, but don't they jump a generation, you might say. Those are not all who descended from Israel. That could be Jacob, and because they're Abraham's descendants, then his grandfather. Because we all know Abraham is the father of the faithful, right? He believed, and it was credited to him as righteousness. He believed when he was yet uncircumcised, so he's the father to the uncircumcised, and then he obeyed, and so he's the father to both. So Paul is basically cutting you down, saying, here or here, doesn't matter. That is not an automatic guarantee. Going on, but through Isaac your descendants shall be named. I want you to keep that in mind about Isaac later, because that is extremely important. We'll come back to this passage. That is, it's not the children of the flesh who are children of Yah, but the children of the promise are regarded as descendants. For this is the word of promise. At this time I will come, and Sarah will have a son. And not only that, but there was also Rebekah, when she had conceived twins by one man, our father Isaac. For though the twins were not yet born and had not done anything good or bad, so that Yah's purpose according to his choice would stand, not because of works, but because of him who calls, it was said to her, the older will serve the younger, just as it is written, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. There is like 5,000 conversations of theology that we could have right now. But there's not that much coffee and there's not much daylight left of Sabbath. But just to keep in mind the children of the promise. What happened to Abraham's sons? Was it what he expected? No. And then to Isaac, was it what he expected? Of course the answer. And then to Jacob saw, he said, alrighty, okay, we're going to keep this pattern up. Manasseh, Ephraim, I know what I'm doing. Wow, he sure did. On that one, he got that one right. I say then, now, if you have a comment here, please jump in. But this still focusing on who is Israel by definition. So far, historically, one man to a nation, and we're still with the nation. They split for a while, but we kind of came back together with a name, and we're still on it. Yes. Yeah. Everything has double meanings, if not more even. And that's yet a discussion on its own. And that's one of the first things I had mentioned is that one group of people believes we are now spiritual Israel. We have picked up all of the promises and the blessings. That's smorgasbord, and that's really careful to do that when you look at the whole message of Scripture. Because do you really want to go there? Because some of those blessings you don't want, and you conveniently choose not to take. Right. He says that a few times, that those who are not a people will be called the people. And yet, you can't get away from what Paul said. To them belongs the covenants, the patriarchs, the Torah, these things. So what is it? And the adoption. I say then, oops, I have misspelling there, sorry. Yah has not rejected his people, has he? Far from it. For I too am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. Wait a minute. What is he doing? Is he just playing with this here? Why does he call himself well, I guess you can, can't you? And I love it. In the passage that I did not list here, 1 Timothy 1:15, for we are all sinners, I myself being the worst, or one of the worst. Paul, that's Paul, the guy that we all know stood and watched the coats while Stephen was stoned, because, not just because he liked watching coats, but the whole idea is he He was studied. He knew the word. Probably knew the other writings of the sages inside and out. And yet he calls it all rubbish for the sake of knowing Messiah and ultimately the fullness of the message. Let's go on here. Okay, so I give you one verse in 11, but I give you a little bit of back to connect to that, to kind of explain that, because this is one of those passages I think is easy to take and rip out and run over to Cleveland, and everybody else is in Philadelphia. What then? What Israel is seeking, it has not obtained. If I just take that, yes, Yahweh has turned his back on all those Jews. That's not what he's saying, because it says, but those who were chosen obtained it, and the rest were hardened. Aha, see, he hardened them. Well, let's look at the incident of Pharaoh, who hardened his heart, yes, and about our heart, yes. But here's what he says in Romans 1. For the wrath of Yah is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. For even though they knew Yahweh, they did not honor him as Yah or give thanks, because they were woke. But they became futile in their speculations and in all of their social media, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, because they had CNN behind them or whatever Gallup poll, they became fools. Therefore Yah gave them over to the lusts of their heart, to impurity. They did it to themselves, and he said, I'll let you go, because that's what I do. I want to woo you. If you don't want to be wooed, whoa. All right, here's the next section. I say then, they did not stumble as to fall, did they? Far from it. But by their wrongdoing, salvation has come to the Gentiles. Ooh, keep that in mind. To make them jealous. There's a two-edged sword there. It's a beautiful thing. So that salvation will come to the Gentiles, so that it will make them jealous. Wow, he's just so madly in love with us, he's going to try to hit us from every angle. And now, if their wrongdoing proves to be riches for the world, and their failure riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their fulfillment be? But I am speaking to you who are Gentiles. Oh, okay, keep that in mind. He's speaking to Gentiles. Therefore, insofar as I am an apostle to Gentiles, oh, well, okay. I magnify my ministry if somehow I may move my own people to jealousy, and save some of them. For if their rejection proves to be the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? No, let's see, who did that? Yes, our Messiah. If the first piece of dough is holy, the lump is also. And if the root is holy, the branches are as well. Oh man, I just realized where I'm at. Okay. But if this is like the meat of the sandwich right here now. Okay? Take a big bite, chew, savor slowly. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive, were grafted in among them and became partaker with them of the rich root of the olive tree, remember we're talking about Israel, do not be arrogant toward the branches. But if you are arrogant, remember that it is not you who supports the root, but the root supports you. You will say then, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. Quite right. They were broken off for their unbelief, but you stand by your faith. I'm going to pause right there for just a minute. What's the difference then? Because we know that there are some people, some theologians that have a candy machine right here, and a candy machine right here, and right here, and they say for a while people used to put their quarter in this candy machine, and they don't do that anymore. Now they go to this one, because that one's empty, and it was proven to be empty. This one will never be empty. It's new and improved. Well, now that one's empty because there was a crisis of some sort, and so Yahweh's moved on. We've moved on to this candy machine. That is to say, we have different dispensers. If we have different dispensers, and at one point our dispensing was by doing the aspects of the law, what is he saying right here? They were broken off for their unbelief, and you stand by your faith. What's the difference between belief and faith? In the sense that they equal each other. Yes, there's a slight difference, but in practical matters, as far as what we're talking about here, how the Jews are saved, how ancient Israel, how modern Israel, how you and I, how anybody is saved, he's talking about faith and belief here, right? Paul is putting it all together. So don't be conceited, but fear, for if Yahweh did not spare the natural branches, he ain't going to spare you neither. That's my translation. See then the kindness and severity of Elohim, of Yahweh, to those who fell, severity, but to you, Yah's kindness, if you continue in his kindness, for otherwise you too will be cut off. And they also, if they do not continue in their unbelief, will be grafted in. For Yah is able to graft them in again. For if you were cut off from what was by nature a wild olive tree, the contrary to nature were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will these who are the natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? There's another passage I never even used. So all Israel will be saved. All right. This is the last passage in Romans for the moment. For I do not want you, brothers and sisters, to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation. That a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel will be saved, just as it is written. I want to pause for a moment and tell you a passage I came across. I didn't include it in here, but it's talking about the promise that was made to Abraham. He says, your children will be enslaved in this place, and then they'll come out. But the time of the Canaanites, there's one of the people of the land has not come yet. In other words, what? The fullness of their sins has not made it to this point yet, right? And so what does he say later in the apostolic writings, in the Brit Hadashah? He says, until the time of the Gentiles is complete. So who are we to say we can boast? Because there's a time where our time is coming complete, and then it's done, right? That's a scary theology to say, well, they had their chance, their bubblegum machine is empty, and we got the new one, and it's eternal. I guess to add to that, Will, is if he says that their lives are a pattern and a testimony, a type and a shadow for us, and Yahweh pulled the rug out from underneath them, we can't trust Yahweh, because he's going to pull the rug out under us too. Yes. And that's really what we come down to is, okay, is it just a timer for the... because it's amazing. We see that in the synagogue and in the church, a certain slant of, I see it from this perspective, and it's just the timer for me, for my benefit. All right, here we are in Ephesians 2, and Josiah, my son, absolutely loves this because I pounded it into his head, so he has nightmares about Ephesians 2 now. Here we go. This is so beautiful. This is the essence. I just love this, okay? As usual, you will love this too because I told you to. And you were dead in your offenses and sins in which you previously walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. Oh, lawlessness? Oh. Among them, we too... Wait, who wrote Ephesians? Paul. Just thought I would check. Among them, we too all previously lived in the lusts of our flesh, indulging in the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature, children of wrath, just as the rest. Say, but Yahweh, being rich in mercy because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our wrongdoings, made us alive together with Messiah. By grace you've been saved. And I'm going to say that here again in a second. And raised us up with him and seated us with him in heavenly places in Messiah Yeshua. There's your message of Purim all over again. So in the ages to come, he might show the boundless riches of his grace in kindness towards us in Messiah Yeshua. For by grace you have been saved through faith. Seems like I heard that before. And this is not of yourselves. It is a gift of Yah, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Messiah Yeshua for good works, which Yahweh prepared beforehand so that we would walk in them. That's a lovely thing. I encourage you and I pray for you the next time you have that conversation, because it will come up now when someone will say to you, I've been saved by grace. I don't have to do works. And you say, oh yes, but if you remember to keep reading in that passage, it says, but you were made for good works in Messiah. And so the whole idea is, I got married to my wife some 30 years ago, and I've seen her once, and I wrote her a card. I think I said, hi, like you, or something like that. And she says, we're married? No. It's the whole idea in the marriage is there's a love affair going on. And then with the love affair, the adventure, the work, the working things out, and the I'm sorries, and I support you, and thank you, and oops, and gray hair. Although she doesn't have very much gray hair yet. I have a lot more gray hair. But just the whole idea is that it's manifest. If I want to show her I love her, if I want to prove it to her, I don't just say I love you. I show her by my actions. Side story real quick. We had my niece and nephew over many years ago when they were little, and for a Rev Shabbat we would light 2 candles, and to help them to understand, I said this candle is for hugs and this candle is for diapers. Sort of a crude way, but they were close to that so they could comprehend. When I say hugs, it means I come to you and I physically, intentionally communicate warmth and embrace and affection. When I change the diaper, I prove it. I don't just hug you and say, wow, you got a really bad diaper there. Love you. No, it's the combination. He says, if you love me, walk with me in the cool of the day. Meet me on my appointed times, and I will meet you there. Okay, therefore, remember that previously you were Gentiles in the flesh. Remember how I said earlier, keep that in the mind, that he made the way for the Gentiles. You were Gentiles in the flesh who are called uncircumcision by the so-called circumcision, which is performed in the flesh by human hands. Remember that you were at that time separate from Messiah. Say, separate from Messiah. Excluded from the people of Israel. Strangers of the covenants. Having no hope. Without Yahweh. But now. Okay, you can stop repeating me, I know. But now, in Messiah Yeshua, you who previously were far away have been brought near by the blood. Brought near. What did he say to that man when he said, what is the greatest command? Love Yahweh with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. That's exactly right, Rabbi. That is the greatest command, and that's the second greatest command. He said, brother, you're in. No. He said, what? He said, you're not far. What do you mean I'm not far? I'm born a true Israelite of the tribe of Benjamin. I get my money. I don't kick dogs. I sing my hymns loud. No, you are near, and the formerly known as Gentile has been brought near. But we don't want to keep going by the name of Gentile, because what Israel has is what we want. We have been wooed. We are jealous to have that too. That's why we want to come in. Okay? So when we say, I'm just a sinner saved by grace, well, yes, you were a sinner, and you do still fall short. But the whole idea is the focus on saved by grace. I now belong to him. I'm in a new family, in a new kingdom, new status. Okay. For he himself is our peace, who has made both groups into one and broke down the barrier of the dividing wall by abolishing in his flesh the hostility, which is the Torah composed of commandments expressed in ordinances. See, there, the Torah, he's getting... so that in himself he might make the two one new person, in this way establishing peace, and that he might reconcile them both in one body through Yahweh, through the cross, to Yahweh through the cross, by it having put to death the hostility. Glory. All right, here's the last section. And he came and preached peace to you who are far away, peace to those who are near, and through him we both have access in one spirit to the Father. So then, you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but you are fellow citizens with the saints. Saint Valentine? And are of Yahweh's household, having been built in the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Messiah Yeshua himself being the cornerstone, in whom the whole building being fitted together and growing into a holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are being built together into a dwelling of Yahweh in the Spirit. Now, that's that section. This is the last section. You go, are you kidding? You still got more? Yes, I do. But this is exciting because this is one definition of Israel we haven't even touched on yet. I'm going to tell you. Okay, ready? Connecting the dots. I'm going to do this quick. Psalm 80 verse 8 says, Israel is vine. John 15, Yeshua is the vine. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him, he'll bear much fruit. Isaiah 41, Israel is the servant. Mark 9, Yeshua is the servant. Sitting with his disciples, his 12, he said, if anyone wants to be first, he shall be last and servant of all. That sounds like washing each other's feet at Passover. That's coming up. Yeshua in perfection. Yeshua, if you haven't figured it out already, I'll tell you right now. Yeshua is the ultimate definition of Israel. Right? Jacob, he fled his home because of Esau. Let's see, what was it called? It's called the red man, hairy man, right? Oh, nothing wrong with red hair. I have some very good friends who have red hair, by the way. But they were known as Edom. Come along a couple of centuries later, there's another Edomite trying to get rid of Yeshua. Wow, who was that? Herod. Okay, Genesis. Jacob fled his home. That's it. Okay, so down to Jeremiah 31. Once again, the new covenant chapter. Chapter of promised restoration and the new covenant. Rachel, Jacob's wife, is comforted. Okay, here we go. Joseph. Oh, isn't this interesting? What a coincidence, right? Joseph has dreams. Yeshua's father, Joseph, has dreams. It seems that the dreams have something to do with the saving of the people. Hosea. Oh, wow. We didn't even hit that one, did we? Or did we hit that one? Hosea 11:1. That's quoted there in Matthew 2, where it says, out of Egypt I called my son. And Hosea was a prophet who was called to the northern kingdom. The northern kingdom. He's not even talking to Judah. And yet at the same time, Yeshua, or I should say, the author, Matthew, then makes the connection for us. All Israel. So where Israel fell short, Yeshua walked it out in perfection. That's the great thing, right? Yeshua had to go to Egypt because Yahweh had his son being called out of Egypt. Here we go, immersion. The immersion of the children of Israel. I'm going to give it to you right there. Boom. What two things are present at the immersion? The water and the Spirit. The children of Israel, they went through the sea, right? What was present? The water. How did they know where to go? There was a pillar of cloud right there. When Yeshua is at the Jordan, there's John out in the water. What do we see? It says, the wording says, the heavens parted. And they saw Pluto? No, not those heavens. The closer heavens. The clouds. Oh, the clouds. And the Ruach came down in the form of the dove. And then he went in the water. So 1 Corinthians tells us that our fathers were all under the cloud and passed through the sea, and all were immersed in Moses in the cloud and the sea. So Yeshua perfected that. He made it full. See, now there's a man at work. I hope it's Sabbath work. Good deal. Here's the next thing. 40 years after the immersion, after walking through the Red Sea, Israel is out for 40 years in a time of testing, the wilderness of testing. And Yeshua goes one day for every year, doesn't he? How about that? And then while he's being tempted, he quotes 3 times from that same book where Moses is standing and saying, look, guys, I got 1 month to wrap this whole thing up before I die and you go into the land of Israel. And besides, I have to tell you all this stuff because Yeshua is going to quote from me a couple 1,500 years from now. Another coincidence? I think not. Okay, Isaiah 41 and 42. Matthew 12, Yeshua is out and he's healing people. And they say, wow, this is the Messiah. And he tells them, don't say anything. And it quotes and it says, this is to fulfill what it said back in Isaiah 42. How about that? The seed. Oh, there's that passage. You knew this one was coming up. Promise made to Abraham and to a seed. When he says seed, he was not talking about plural. He said seed, showing Yeshua as the rightful heir of Israel's covenant. Light. Another one. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of Yahweh, oops, missed that one, has risen upon you. For behold, darkness will cover the earth, and deep darkness the peoples, but Yahweh will rise upon you, and his glory will be upon you. The nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. He stood in between the courts and he said, I am the light of the world. And then later he turns around and he says to us what? This was where I had the revelation. This is where it all came together. Because if Yeshua is the end of the law, then his being an example of the perfect Israel, the perfect second Adam, is nothing to me because he's ended it. But if teleos means here fulfillment, makes it full, it gives me purpose because he is the light of the world and he tells me to go out and be a light. Why? Because I'm part of Israel. I'm part of his plan. He tells me that, go back, he says, I am part of his seed. He says, they'll know by your actions, but it's going to be proclaimed and all eyes will see. It's basically saying when he lives out the fullness of Israel, he's then turning around to me and giving me the challenge to do the same. And I go, wow, that's why I want the covenants and the promises and the patriarchs and the Torah and the Sabbaths. Woohoo. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll read this one. Exodus 24. This is Moses standing at the foot of Sinai. And he offers up the sacrifice and he says, behold, the blood of the covenant which Yahweh has made with you in accordance with all these words. This is where the people say, all that he has said we will do and hear. We're going to do it. And on the way while we're doing it, then we're going to pick it up and understand why. But we're going to trust you because we can trust you. Okay? And then this is what we're going to rehearse again here in a couple of weeks. When he had taken the cup and given thanks, he gave it to them saying, drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant. Wow, kind of sounds like what Moses just said, which is being poured out for the forgiveness of many. Boom. Whew, I can't read all of this, but look at that. Hebrews 9. He appeared as a high priest of the good things having come. He entered through the greater and more perfect tabernacle. Down to 14, how much more? Okay, 13, just real quick. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling those who have been defiled sanctify for the cleansing of the flesh, you notice he didn't say it didn't sanctify, but he says how much more the blood of Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish. Boom. So ultimately, it's not that they were trying to fulfill a watchtower society thing of get my hours in, and then maybe if I'm good enough, I'll be in that kingdom for 1,000 years, and then I'll die, and I'll be just like the sinful guy and who died just right away, and I'll never be one of those 144. Sorry, I'm going off on a Jehovah's Witness tangent there, but it blows my mind to think that most Jehovah's Witnesses only think that they were made to live on the new earth for 1,000 years and then to return to dust. The same as the sinner. Might as well live it up, because it's the same end. Yeah, it doesn't. Sorry, let's not go there for now. Sorry. For this reason, he is the mediator of a new covenant. Moving on. So who is this Messiah, this perfect picture of Israel? He is the image of the invisible Elohim, the firstborn of all creation, who, as he already existed in the form of Elohim, did not consider equality with him something to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking on the form of a bondservant and being born in the likeness of man. So boom, he is the manifestation, he is what we understand of Yahweh. And we can embrace him. And then just as much, he shows us how to live by being the perfection and giving us the example. What then? If some did not believe, their unbelief will not nullify the faithfulness, will it? No. Nor are they all children because they are Abraham's descendants, but through, here's where it is. I come back to this. This is one of the greatest little nuggets of today. We all know about Abraham, father of the faithful, father in righteousness to the uncircumcised and to the circumcised. But here, Paul points out, through Isaac your descendants shall be named. Why is that so important? Because this is one of Yahweh's switcheroos. And because you and I were not born a descendant of Jacob, and maybe we were. That's not even the point. The whole point is we have been brought near. We've been adopted. He's brought us in, and the example we have is Isaac. It's not the natural born son, it's the son of the spirit, of the supernatural. That's what gives us hope. It's not the children of the flesh, but the children of the promise are regarded as descendants. So you and I should rejoice in the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. And you, sons and daughters like Isaac, are children of promise, in order that in Messiah, Yeshua, the blessings of Abraham would come to the Gentiles, so that we would receive the promise. Boom. And so I'm just about done here now. I come back to Ephesians 2. Therefore, remember, you were Gentiles in the flesh. You were separated, but now. So you're no longer strangers. Josiah, I know you love this passage. I'm going to read it to you all the way home tonight, if we're in the same car. Ezekiel 37. You know what this says. Putting the two sticks together, and they become one stick in his hand, don't they? And he says, I will save them from their apostasies by which they sinned, and I will cleanse them. They will be my people, and I will be their Elohim. Where have we heard that before? Through Moses. And finally, here's my last passage, Isaiah 56, one of my favorite passages in all Scripture. This is what Yahweh says. Maintain justice and do what is right, for my salvation is about to come, my righteousness is about to be revealed. Hey, I'm about to show you something. It's not just a deal of the century, it's the deal of eternity. I'm about to give it. Ready? Yeah, what is it? What is it? Here's the guy who's gonna get it. Yeah, what is it? What is it? Okay, here it comes. Blessed is the man who does this. Yeah, what? The Son of Man who holds it fast, who keeps the Sabbath without profaning it, and keeps his hand from doing any evil. Isn't that the Council of Jerusalem in Acts 15? He says, let's start with these few things, and then every Sabbath they will go and they will hear the Torah, and they will discipleship, won't they? As they walk along, they'll come to know me better. And the foreigner who has joined themselves to Yahweh to minister to him, to love the name, to be his servants, to keep the Sabbath without profaning it, and who hold fast to my covenant, I will bring them to my holy mountain, make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be offered on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. Thus declares Adonai Yahweh, who gathers the dispersed of Israel. And here we've come, full circle. Israel. I will gather to them still others besides those already gathered. What are they going to be called? Israel. So hopefully someday this will not be on display. This will be in function. Thank you for your and take this and then go study it. There are tons more passages And there's more that shows Yeshua and his fulfillment of that picture of who Israel was supposed to be, that he calls us to be.